Hello! Last year I spent a lot of time reading Warhammer books, and I wanted to talk about whether I thought those books were good, or if they were a huge waste of my time, which they probably were, but I really enjoy pulp, action, sci-fi books, so I think it was fun reading most of these books, but I made a tier list, and I'm going to talk about which books I liked. The first book we're going to talk about is the first book I read, which was Xenos by Dan Abnett. And this book, I would say, is the whole series is good. It's a little overrated. It's not a great detective story. It sort of just tells you what the mystery is. I don't think anyone could figure out that cryo tubes on a planet being drained of power would power an orb that had a consciousness inside of it, and then that consciousness had secrets to an alien race that had a Necronomicon with the secrets of the universe in it. That Necronomicon would have a second copy to translate it that was also being hunted down by a demon. And it's not a great detective story, but it's a good action story and a good exploration of the Warhammer universe. I think Eisenhorn's a good character. His ability to sort of show the reader the differences between being a staunch inquisitor, very firm in their beliefs against the heretics, is very good. I think his psychic powers are used pretty well in action scenes to make some good fights, like getting people to get out of cover or impulse people to surrender or little things like that. His side characters aren't really explored that much in these books. Fishig, Midas, and Elizabeth are sort of just along for the ride, but they're interesting enough that they don't take away from the story or in any way. But I do think that the story suffers from Dan Abnett trying to do too much at once. He wants to introduce the Glaw family, and then he wants to introduce Pontius Glaw, as well as these weird alien race, and then he wants to introduce the Emperor's children into it. It's a little too much to do within this story, and I think it shows because by the end, like a third of these ideas that he's developed are just thrown away. The Emperor's children die, or the soldier dies. The entire Glaw family, except for Pontius, gets exterminated, and then the alien race that gets introduced that is pretty interesting and very unique, they get just exterminated within a small paragraph, even though they're built up as this fifth dimensional understanding superior race. They just get wiped out very quickly, which felt kind of unearned. I expected a good action detective story. I got a good action story with a pretty cool character in it, so I'd say it's about a B. Not great, not terrible. I'd definitely read it again. What I will never read again is Malleus. The first two-thirds, well, the first half is great. Some of the best action, some of the best sci-fi, the Inquisition's homeworld's being attacked. It is very well done, very cool to read, but the ending with the demons and the Inquisitor Caiaphas, the battle at Cadia, that was just some of the most rushed garbage I've ever read. Within 5 pages, Eisenhorn defeats 2 demons, this big bad guy that's been pulling the strings since the first book, and he barely has half a line of dialogue before Eisenhorn just kills him, and it's pretty ridiculous. So I cannot believe that this book exists in the form that it does. Like, it should have been given a rewrite or a re-release just to flesh out that last fight a little bit, but oh well, okay. Eisenhorn's fine. Midas, Eisenhorn's pilot, is dead. He's just gone. His daughter takes his place and does nothing in the book. Elizabeth, again, is a love interest, but we don't really see much of their relationship. Eisenhorn just sort of says how pretty she is and that he's in love with her, but I don't really buy the romance. And it's just not very good book. Like I said, the first half has some great action, but it's just not good. I would never reread this except for that first big action piece on the parade, the psychers escaping, and all of that carnage, that gory carnage was very fun, but it's not enough to make me want to reread this book ever again. It's a 0 out of 10 because that ending is just botched. It's like they just gave up trying to write something. I don't know what happened there. I think Hereticus redeems the series, but only a little bit. I think that it had a lot of potential, but it, again, sort of failed to stick the landing. There is this sort of haze, this, I don't know what you want to call it, there's this idea that there should be a mystery, but you'd have to be brain dead to not know what the mystery was, who the secret villain was pulling the strings, so it's not really a detective story at all. The only compelling thing is Eisenhorn's corruption that happens throughout his time dealing with Trubael, going from a good Inquisitor to a less good Inquisitor Malleus, and then just to a full-blown heretic in this book. That arc is done very well. Fishig sort of being his Jiminy Cricket, his voice of reason, getting killed, and then also being corrupted along with Eisenhorn, being not only killed, but being possessed by Trubael. So now, instead of an angel on his shoulder, his friend is now literally being possessed and puppeted by a demon. So this shining beacon of what the Imperium was, what Fishig stood for, is now just a demon, just sort of taunting Eisenhorn. I feel like all of that was done very well. The plot and the story side of it, with all of the other characters. Medea Bentoncourt, she didn't have anything to do with Malleus, and now she sort of has a father-daughter relationship with Eisenhorn, but again, it's not done very well because we didn't really get to know about Midas, and then the big thing here is her trying to find out more about her dad, but it could have done better if we knew anything about Midas, if we knew anything about his character besides he was a pilot, but that's whatever. And then Elizabeth gets knocked unconscious, and we're supposed to care about that because she's in love with Eisenhorn, but we don't really know much about their relationship, so that kind of falls flat. And then the entire story is going very well. There's this mystery psychic woman that's stopping Eisenhorn in his tracks wherever he goes, and then she just gets blown up, and then Eisenhorn doesn't know where to go, doesn't know where to find Pontius Glaw, who's the big bad secret villain. And what do you know? Ravenor comes along. He just happens to have a future-seen psychic Eldar that tells Eisenhorn exactly where he needs to go to fight Pontius, which is pretty convenient. It's almost, I would say, statistically impossible for such a thing to occur. I would think that such a thing is laughably bad writing for not only a character to suddenly know a future-seen fortune teller, but for that character to be someone who is supposed to be sworn to kill fortune-seen psychics of different races of aliens. Good thing that Ravenor was open-minded in Warhammer towards aliens. I don't know, I feel like the Inquisition kind of is the last place you would see that, but, whatever, it happens, and that's how we get our big fight. Now, in the first book of Xenos, there's not a botched ending, but a very anticlimactic ending, where Eisenhorn fights an Emperor's children, a space marine, who gets distracted by a book, and Eisenhorn cuts his head off. And then there's a fight with a big worm in Malleus, a big worm monster that takes up 70 pages because Eisenhorn's trying to find Pontius Glaw to talk to him about demons. And that worm fight is okay. Eisenhorn sings a song or prays to the Emperor, and the worm gets sleepy and dies or something. And then the final fight against Inquisitor Caiaphas is, well, there was a rough draft of a fight against Eisenhorn and Inquisitor Caiaphas on Cadia, and then the final fight was against Eisenhorn and Pontius Glaw. Pontius Glaw is now in this mechanical robot angel form or whatever, and he can shoot the archangel spear feathers. He has these claw legs. He has machine strength. He is almost impervious to damage, and Eisenhorn has a big fight with him. Trubael fights Pontius Glaw's demon. They fight to prevent this even bigger demon from being summoned, and then Eisenhorn kills him, and there you have it. That is the Eisenhorn series. A series of not unfortunate events, just implausible events. A lot of the time Eisenhorn is saved by Deus Ex Machinas. There's sort of a luck to his character that Caiaphas Cain would be jealous of. Yeah, and then the endings are less than stellar. So I'd say the action and the character of Eisenhorn himself is enough to carry the series, to put it into a B. It's not great, but it's good. I wouldn't mind rereading Xenos and Hereticus, but Malleus you can skip entirely. Now, the next series I read was Caiaphas Cain, and I would say For the Emperor is probably the best book on here. It is a better introduction to Warhammer than Eisenhorn. It is funnier and more interesting. It has a better mystery to it than Xenos or any of the Eisenhorn books had. For the Emperor has better characters with Caiaphas Cain, just the different soldiers he interacts with, his sidekick. Jurgen, Amberly Vale, and Castine are vastly better supporting characters than Midas, than Elizabeth, than those are fine characters, but they're nowhere near as interesting or charming as the Caiaphas Cain characters are. Caiaphas is supposed to be a hero of the Imperium. He's supposed to be this legendary figure. The truth is that he's more of a coward. He hides from battles. He tries to run away from danger, but he always ends up in a situation where he gets to have a glorious battle, or he gets to take credit for doing something that wasn't intentional. And it's very much the same style of humor as Blackadder, which I really enjoyed. I thought the book, it may not be the best Warhammer book, but it is definitely the best Black Library book I've read. Like, a comedy probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Warhammer, but it was very compelling, it was fun, and I would definitely recommend it highly. I probably plan on rereading For the Emperor. Then the next book, Caverns of Ice, is basically the first book again, just a lot less interesting because you don't have Amberly Vale or the Inquisition. You don't have a lot of the same beats to play off of. There isn't a villain that Caiaphas Cain gets to interact with. It's orcs and necrons who are kind of mindless killing machines, and a lot of the book is spent in tunnels, which aren't that interesting of a set piece. Not interesting for a reader to read about people traveling in tunnels trying to find bugs or find orcs. That they do get to fight orcs eventually, but it takes way too long for that fight to happen. It should have been something that got fast forwarded a little bit, and then the necrons start popping up. But it's fine as a Caiaphas Cain book. It's skippable, but it's still fun enough that if you're a fan of the character, you won't be disappointed by it, but you won't be... it's sort of filler. It's like a filler arc in an anime. You're like, okay, whatever, this is fine, this is serviceable. It doesn't make you feel dumb or make you feel insulted for reading it like the ending of Malleus did for me. so I'd say it's a C. You can skip it if you want to. It's not something that is like For the Emperor, where you're gonna feel very satisfied with the ending, with the characters, and everything involved in it. And then next is Traitor's Hand in the Caiaphas Cain series, and I would say this is also very well done. It's a return to form from Caverns of Ice. I was expecting more of the same. You get the great character of Caiaphas and Jurgen really shining again. You get him playing off of different characters, different commissars, different generals that are not quite questioning him, but they're sort of catching on to his shtick of being in the right place at the right time, and it's very entertaining to read his interactions with characters in the Warhammer universe, him playing off of these more serious archetypes of the general that doesn't mess around, or the staunch, devout commissar to the emperor. And then the mystery of this book is you can kind of see it coming, but it was more compelling than Eisenhorn. Like, For the Emperor and Traitor's Hand had a better story about what the hell was going on with these aliens and these characters than anything in Xenos. It definitely had a better ending anyways. Next book I read was Ravenor, which was... I think Ravenor definitely benefited from having more characters, but it's the opposite of Eisenhorn, where in Eisenhorn, Gregor Eisenhorn is carrying the story, and the side characters are along for the ride. In Ravenor, it's the exact opposite. The other characters are carrying the story, and Ravenor's along for the ride. Ravenor's sort of the shotgun in the video game. You can't have him in every scene, because then he can just destroy any enemy in front of him, because he's basically a walking nuclear machine. He can just obliterate anything in his path. So you have him sort of, for whatever reason, being support to the characters that he's in charge of, which is fine. You get to explore some interesting mercenaries, some interesting interrogators in the Warhammer universe. But I feel like the entire Ravenor series was, again, it felt like filler. It felt like you were building up to something, you were building up. Ravenor, you build up to this mystery of who is he gonna fight, who is behind the secret cartel, and then you don't find out, and it's all set up for the next book, where you're gonna find out who betrayed Ravenor, who betrayed his team, why did they get betrayed. There's this big fight against people who you thought you could trust, but now they're in on the cartel, and you need to find out why were they set up, and it's build up, and you don't go anywhere. And then Ravenor returned. You go back to the planet, and there's this weird cult of people with these mechanical crows. There's this demon that's gonna be part of this prophecy, and there's the enemy that set Ravenor and his team up. This enemy that has a plan to destroy the planet and almost become a godlike being, and it stops. It suddenly stops in its tracks, and the characters, they don't really progress in what they were doing. They just sort of continue going on, and they continue working for Ravenor, and the demon appears from the prophecy, and it doesn't get resolved, because that's build up to the next thing, and then the villain doesn't die, because you need to build him up for the next thing. He needs to fight Ravenor. And again, these three books didn't go anywhere. They just were all build up for something. Even the last book, Ravenor Rogue, there's finally payoff to everything in the previous two books. The big enemy, the nemesis of Ravenor, is finally dealt with. Ravenor's team all have little arcs. Nail has to determine if he's a mercenary or if he is a servant of the Imperium, but then Ravenor, he just sort of, again, he's never in the forefront, you never learn too much about him, and because of that, he's just sort of along for the ride. And then the demon gets revealed, it starts destroying stuff, and then you defeat it, because that's what you do. It destroys a planet, but you ultimately defeat it, and then, because Ravenor went rogue, there's build up to the next thing. It's very much like Dan Abnett is writing his own Avengers universe, his own multiverse. So I'd say the entire Ravenor series is just sort of, they exist. You can read them if you want to. Ravenor is a cool idea for a character, but the story that Dan Abnett wrote for him is not great. Ravenor has very cool powers, but or in Eisenhorn there were cool things you could do with those abilities, cool tricks, cool things that he can make someone come out of cover, he can interrogate them with these powers. Ravenor has abilities on a level where if you are going to use them, you can't really do them in neat, quick, and fascinating ways. It's really just like a sledgehammer where instead of writing ways to use these powers in cool and interesting ways, you need to find cool and interesting ways to limit his powers, which is a lot less fun to read if you are trying to root for this character and the author keeps introducing things to, there's this happening device that, he can't use his powers right now. There's this demon that's absorbing his powers. He can't use his powers right now. There's this big thing happening where he's distracted. He can't use his powers right now. And it's like, okay, well, can we ever see him do something for the story? He's supposed to be the main character. The book's named after him, but it seems like instead of where Eisenhorn had Deus Ex Machina save him because he was out of his depth, there needs to be Deus Ex Machinas to save the villains from Ravenor doing his job. So yeah, they're okay. I read them because I really liked the idea of the character of Ravenor. I expected it to be a lot like Glokta from the first Law series, and that is not what I got at all. Glokta is sort of a snarky character that is very smart. He's very calculated. He comes up with very well laid out plans. Because of his limitations and his disability, he needs to be one step ahead of everyone else. Ravenor doesn't have that problem. He is still just as deadly as a space marine, so the author needs to write ways to get around that, and it really shows because he didn't really know what to do with Ravenor, who is too powerful to be in this story. And now we come to the Horus Heresy. I have to admit, I read this series out of order just because when I was trying to find Horus Rising, it was out of stock everywhere, and so I just started reading False Gods, then I went back to Horus Rising, and I have to say, Horus Rising it's Dan Abnett again, and I have to say, it's very similar to Eisenhorn. My problems with Eisenhorn, there is just too much that he tries to introduce. There's this story with the false emperor, then there's the arachnids, the Tyranids. I assume they're the Tyranids, but they're called mega-arachnids. And then there's the technocracy, and then there's the word bearers with their plot, and then there's this lodge, this secret society going on, and there's the poets, and then there's demons being introduced for the first time to the Space Marines, and it's too much to be done in this short span of time. It felt like that entire thing with the mega-arachnids should have just been scooped out of the book. It should have just been taken out, just like that big worm fight in Malleus should have just been scooped out. You should have just had Eisenhorn find Pontius Glaw, and then you would have had plenty of time for a big epic fight with with Inquisitor Caiaphas and Horus Rising. You should have just gotten rid of all that mega-arachnid stuff and had more room for the technocracy, because there's a very interesting thing with the politics of Horus and the characters, and Then there's just a big fight because of the word bearers, and the negotiations go awry, and then you just cut. Like, Horus orders the Space Marines to fight, and then it just cut. It's over. You don't get to read about the fight. You don't get to read about what happens. Do they go to war? Do they keep fighting? Do they just leave and skedaddle? It does explain that, but again, it's like in a very short paragraph. It explains everything that happened, and it's like, well, I was interested in that. Why did you cut away from that? Why did we spend 100 pages on this bug world that didn't go anywhere? What was the entire point of that? I guess it was to introduce the Emperor's Children characters, but you could have introduced them fighting the technocracy or something, like trying to broker peace with them, and it's so many wasted opportunities. And then the character of Horus is like Santa Claus in this book. Since I read False Gods first, it's very different. In this book, he's described as like a father figure, and then in False Gods, he's described like Zeus. Like, he's two different characters in these books. Loken, for whatever reason, Loken's consistent throughout all three books among the three different writers that I read. He's just a great character, I guess, because he stays consistent in all of his beliefs, everything he does. But Horus is like Santa Claus in this book. He hugs a character, he kneels before a character at one point. He's very charming and witty, and he seems like someone you would want to talk to. The other Space Marines, Abaddon, Torgodon, and then Lucius, and the name's escaping me, but the other Emperor's Children character, they're all very good characters to be introduced. They were all interesting, and I wanted to know more about them, but just like Ravenor, it was just kind of build up. You get this big promise that you're gonna see Horus corrupted, and it's just more of like the first issue of a comic book. Like, it lays the groundwork for what it's gonna be about, but you don't really get any juicy stuff happening in this book, which it's the first part of, I don't know, a 50-part series or whatever the hell, how long this has been going on for. So it's a C. It's alright. It's nothing amazing. I was, again, unimpressed by Dan Abnett for all the praise he gets. I don't think that I would skip this book if I was rereading the Horus Heresy. I feel like False Gods was just better done. Horus, and every time he appears, feels like a god. He feels like a demigod. He feels like a Primarch. Like, you don't want to mess with him. You want to avert your gaze if at all possible, because you're not worthy of being in his presence. All these characters are just mesmerized by him, and that's how you should write a Primarch. He should be this larger than life character. And then even though I hadn't read Horus Rising when I was reading False Gods, it was still very well written. You still get to understand Loken's betrayal of his feeling of betrayal, that his other brothers would go behind his back and use chaos or these dark magics to summon Horus back to the living. The entire fight against Nurgle and his Nurglings in this fight was very well done. It felt like a big obstacle that none of the Space Marines had ever had to fight against before. It felt like something new in this universe, something exciting, something that once you see these 8-foot tall, machine-bound demigods being scared or being surprised at these aliens, these zombies, it was very well done. It was very good action. Loken playing off of Targadon and the Mournville, the other characters of Abaddon, all of it worked. All the poet stuff worked. When they're bringing Horus back to the apothecary and they knock aside citizens, and the humans are horrified at these Space Marines just swatting them away like flies, killing innocent people. They're just horror at this. It all worked. It all felt very good, was all consistent, all believable. The only bad thing that prevents this book from being great is Horus's vision that he gets on the planet of it's Davin's moon. He gets this vision where the word bearer Erebus disguises himself and comes to Horus and shows him a vision of the future where the Emperor is worshipped as a god, and he tells Horus that this is the Emperor's plan. And then Magnus the Red comes and tells him, no, don't believe that. That's not the plan. You need to stay on the righteous path. You need to stay on the path of order and the Emperor. And Horus says he doesn't believe either of them. And then in the next scene, he's just working with Erebus. And it doesn't make it doesn't make any sense. He says he doesn't believe any of them. He says he knows neither of them are telling the full truth about what's going on. And then he orders or informs Leman Russ that Magnus Red is using magic and that Leman Russ should destroy Prospero. And then he just continues working with Erebus as if he was fully in belief of this idea that the Emperor was turning evil. And then instead of making a deal with this society that have an SCT, the blueprint machines that have all of human knowledge on them, instead of just making a deal with them to join the Imperium and then stealing the SCT and then just taking it from them once they've brokered peace, Horus just goes to war with them, where there's the chance that they might destroy this machine, even accidentally. Horus might send a bombardment to break through something or shoot down a ship, and he might have accidentally destroyed this machine at any time, or anything could have happened, really. He started a war with these people that probably would have just let him take it. They seemed like they were very chill about everything, and he just starts this war with them. So at the point where Horus starts having the vision, the entire book falls apart. And so the first part of the book, very good. Loken, Torgaden, and even Horus are well written. The poets were kind of my favorite part in the story. They were very compelling. I liked Sinderman and his fall from being an atheist to a believer was very believable, and it's just disappointing that the book didn't land on its feet, which seems to be a running theme with a lot of these books. And then we have Galaxy in Flames, and at this point, Horus is evil, Loken kind of knows he's evil, Torgaden kind of knows he's evil, the Emperor's children, Lucius, Saul something or other, know that Fulgrim is sort of in on this plan with Horus, and everyone knows something's up, everything's uneasy, and then the best action scene out of any of these books I've read happens. The fall of Istavan 3, or whatever planet they're on. It's the purging of the loyal members among the traitor legions, the loyal soldiers among the traitor legions. And it is amazing. It is like 200 pages of just pure action carnage. And I loved this book. This book was amazing. I put it up there with For the Emperor because it sort of takes a while to get there. It's sort of, there's a lot of Loken running around trying to talk to people, trying to promise that he'll protect them. Cinderman running around with Titan crew members trying to protect the Saint character. There's some build up to it, but unlike if Galaxy in Flames had been written by Dan Abnett, the entire fight of Estevan 3 would have been 10 pages, and it would have just said the Titan killed, the virus bombs killed everyone, and then Loken and his men survived, but then the Titan stomped on them. Like, it would have been disgusting to read this book if Dan Abnett had read it. It's weird because I've read Dan Abnett's his run on Nova, and it was very good. I don't know what happened between that and his writing for Black Library. I don't know why he just can't write a good ending for any of these books. The technocracy was very interesting, and then it just stops. Inquisitor Caiaphas seems like a great villain, and then just stops. And then these aliens and Xenos would have been great to learn about, and then just stops. And then Ravenor, God, I don't know what happened to Dan Abnett and his ability to write a solid ending. It seems to have disappeared. And so anyway, Galaxy in Flames is great. It's just a great pulp action book. It is a great war book. It's what I wanted from the first few books of the Horus series, or just a little more exploration of Horus. But Horus seems to have just instantly flipped a switch in False Gods. So just having them be evil right from the onset of Galaxy in Flames, and then this big battle happening and taking up a majority of the book, is exactly what they should have done. It was handled perfectly. And you know what, just to follow that up, let's have another book that is mostly action, which is Storm of Iron by Graham McNeill, who wrote False Gods on this list. Storm of Iron it's interesting. Again, it's a lot of action, and there is a main character of Hansu, who is a traitor space marine. He is an Iron Warrior with the blood of an Imperial Fist in him, with the gene seed of an Imperial Fist. And the other characters of the Warsmith, Foryx, and Kroger, they're not characters, they're just mustache-twirling bad guys, which is fine. You don't need to explore them, but Hansu wasn't really explored either. He's just sort of told he's a half-breed, that he's not worthy of being an Iron Warrior. And, okay, it's something to have for your traitor 10,000-year-old evil guy, but it's not very compelling for me to read. It's sort of... It was the only thing about his character that anyone talked about. It was the only thing he thought about, that he wasn't born as an Iron Warrior, or he didn't have Iron Warrior gene seed, which you kind of need a little more to play off of. Like, he should have had one sidekick or one friend he could talk to, like one henchman that he could bully around, which it was okay. The action was well done. The sieging and the fights of the Citadel and the Iron Warriors against Guardsmen, that was all handled great. The action was gory, it was grimdark, there were sieges and humans dying left and right, Iron Warriors outsmarting people with siege traps and techniques that they were doing, and if you're a fan of the Iron Warriors, you'll probably enjoy it. I feel like it wasn't that great of a siege story. I've read better siege books, there were twists and turns in this, but it wasn't that compelling of a book. There's just something about it where I feel like it could have been a little more clever. It could have had a little more twists and turns with the fighting. Like everything was just sort of done a little too fast. Like they set up this thing where they capture a bunch of humans from an outpost, and then they send them out to be shot at by the enemy. So the guardsmen are firing at prisoners of war, their own fellow guardsmen, because they think that they're slaves or soldiers of the Iron Warriors, and so they accidentally shoot their own men. And the Iron Warriors do this to learn the range of their guns, how good they shoot, what their tactics are for shooting these guns, how fast they can reload and all that. And that's smart. But then that's really the only smart thing they do. They try to set this other thing where the Iron Warriors have siege weapons, and the Guardsmen have a tool that's going to defeat the Iron Warriors' siege weapons. They have their own guns that are going to obliterate the siege weapons. And so they try to play it up like there's this other big twist after the Iron Warriors learning about the guns, the range of the guns and all that. And the twist is they just run straight at the guns and destroy them. We're the Iron Warriors. We're tactical geniuses. What's our plan, boss? You see those guns over there? Let's run right at them. Okay, yeah, that's a cool twist, I guess. That's neat. I've just read better siege stories. I've read a lot of fantasy castle sieges, a lot of Viking sieges, and there are a lot of better twists. I've read better twists on like soldiers outsmarting each other, enemy captains, and all that. So it was fine. You have cool scenes with the guardsmen. You have cool scenes with Iron Warriors. So if you're a fan of the Iron Warriors, definitely check it out. Or even if you're a big guardsman fan, if you like the human side, this is a very good book to pick up. May not be that satisfying for you, but the human side had good characters. The Iron Warriors were kind of lacking. They weren't very. I didn't really want to root for them. They were cool. I like Iron Warriors, but I didn't really want to root for them because they weren't characters. They were just suits of armor that killed people. And so ultimately, I'd say Storm of Iron is right alongside False Gods. It had potential to be great, but ultimately it's just it's good. I would reread it again, but I'd probably reread Caiaphas Cain or Galaxy in Flames first. And speaking of Traitor Space Marines, we have the Night Lord series. The Iron Warriors were what I expected the Night Lords to be, because in Storm of Iron, Kroger and Forex and the Warsmith, they're just kind of mindless killing machines. They just want to kill people. They don't really have any motives beyond killing people and fighting and being evil. There are characters like that in the Night Lord series, like Zarl and Vandred. there's one point, it's the edgiest shit I've ever read, and there's a scene where Vandred, the captain of the Night Lords, is crying blood as they are killing Imperial soldiers, as they're having this spaceship battle. Vandred is crying blood at how happy he is that they're killing people. And it's the stupidest, most edgy shit I've ever read. And that's when I realized I'm going to love this series, because where Storm of Iron, it just sort of, it played it as we're evil and we're gonna kill people. But the Night Lords, they don't just like killing people, they love killing people. It's almost like he's getting off on killing these guys, but not like it's the first time he's felt alive in like 10,000 years or whatever, and he's just crying blood and killing people, and oh my gosh, it's the most over the top stuff, and you have to read this series. If anything, Caiaphas Cain and the Night Lord series, you have to read them. They're Night Lords is everything you would want out of a Chaos Space Marine book. It is over the top, it's silly, but it plays it straight in like such an amazing way. There are human characters that the Night Lords get to play off of, which I think Storm of Iron would have greatly benefited from having. Maybe not as big of a role as the human characters did in Night Lords, but there should have been something for Hansu to play off of. You almost got that with Storm of Iron. There's a character who plays off of Kroger, and then that character gets powerful, gets some chaos power, and then they just enter the same void where Dan Abnett's ability to write an ending went, and you didn't really get much from that character, so whatever. But Septimus and Octavia are characters that play a big role in all three of these books, and I thought I would hate all of the human characters, sort of like a Transformers movie where you have human characters, but you just want to get to the Transformers. But I wanted to learn more about Septimus and Octavia. They were interesting characters. They had basically Stockholm Syndrome. They hated their job. They wanted to leave, but they knew that this is kind of like the coolest thing they're ever going to do with their lives. they're kind of worthless people, and they know that if they do leave, they'll either be killed just for having stepped aboard on a trader ship, or they'll just live their life on some shitty hive world forever. And so Soul Hunter is basically a big backstory about Talos and his crew what made the Night Lords become traitor space marines, what made Conrad Kurz go crazy, why is Talos having visions, are his visions true, are they going to come true, are they always true, and you also get some Abaddon the Despoiler in here, where, again, you get traitor space marines betraying each other, backstabbing each other, just knifing each other in the back, ruining each other's plans, trying to get the upper hand, and their mustache-twirling villains trying to outsmart other mustache-twirling villains, and it's all great, it's all good. I want to read more about it. I want to read another series of Night Lord books. I want to read the continuation, a trilogy after this book. So Soul Hunter, I feel like the fight with Abaddon the Despoiler, the fight with the Titan, the fight with Septimus and the other humans when they try to visit Abaddon the Despoiler, all the action pieces were great, the characters were great, Septimus playing off the Night Lords, treating them like gods, treating them like these larger-than-life characters, and you also get the personality of each character. Uzas is basically Kroger from Storm of Iron. He's a Korn the Berserker, but he has moments of clarity, and you sort of see him be a sympathetic character towards the end of the series, but at the beginning he's just this psychopathic character, and you don't really understand why he's psychopathic, besides he worships Korn, I guess. And then you get Sirion, who is more of a happy-go-lucky character. He's sort of like Torgodon, I guess. He plays off of Talos. He's more jovial, cracks more jokes. And then you get Zarl, who is he's the muscle of the group. He's the one who gets shit done. And then Talos is the leader, the captain, and he has to unite all of these psychopaths together he has to unite them in the goal to defeat the Emperor and all of his servants, and they need to not only find a way to defeat the Emperor and cripple the Imperium, but they also need to find a way to get rid of all this bullshit with Chaos and Vandred and Abaddon the Despoiler just getting in their way. And I really liked Soul Hunter. I'd say it's an A. The action isn't good enough for it to be grimdark, and the characters aren't quite compelling enough on the same level as Caiaphas Cain. So it's a good book, definitely recommend, but not amazing. It's just very good. It's a great book. And then there's Blood Reaver, which is you can skip it. It's pretty forgettable. It explores more why Talos is doing what he's doing. It's basically just a stepping stone for Talos to become more of a leader in the series, and for Vandred to be dethroned. Although it's just an explanation of Talos gaining more confidence, explaining more why the Night Lords do what they do, and establishing Septimus and Octavia's place within the Night Lords a little bit better. And the Red Corsairs they weren't as intimidating as Abaddon the Despoiler. They didn't feel like they could just destroy them if they caught one whiff of the Night Lords beginning to stab them in the back, in the same way that Abaddon had this presence there. And next is Voidstalker, which I would say is a B. It's not quite as good as Soul Hunter, but it's the conclusion of all these characters' stories. It is, well, you know what? I think it is an A, actually. I think it is. The fight scenes were done better. There's a big fight against Eldar. It explains some more plot points that are kind of missing from everywhere else, and the conclusions with all the characters were pretty satisfying. I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more from Talos at the end there, but everyone's arc is sort of completed. Sirion and Uzas, their arcs are done very well, you understand why everything that happened previously happens within this book, why they were acting they were previously, and then Zarl's character has a very good arc. He's wow. There was a fight with him in this book that it was pretty impressive. I had forgotten about that, and that's why I got bumped up because of his fight. Kind of early on, he has this big fight that is a lot of fun, and then the Voidstalker themselves or herself has a big fight, as well as the best thing in Blood Reaver are the Raptors, the characters that get introduced, the this squad of Raptors and their leader. He has some of the best fights in the series as well. Just these Raptors flying around, killing shit. Like I said, this is what you want from a Chaos Space Marine series. You want characters stabbing each other in the back. You want characters being just absolutely disgusting and cruel, but also having fun doing it. You want characters that relish and have a purpose for why they're doing these things. Besides, I'm gonna kill people because I want to kill people. I want to kill people because I love it, because I want to stick it to the Emperor, because we are right, because we are righteous, and you get all of that here. You get a pretty good argument that the Night Lords are kind of, from their perspective, in the right in what they're doing. So that's my review of all the books I read. I would say my only big regret is reading so much Dan Abnett. I feel like I could have skipped Ravenor and not missed anything, because there wasn't much that happened, really. Ravenor didn't progress much as a character. He was kind of right the whole time. So okay, yeah. I guess I'll learn from that in the future. Maybe I should just try and refund my copy of Pariah before I read it. But I'll probably read it and then do another review like this. So once I've read enough Warhammer books to warrant another video. But yeah, this is my opinion of all the Warhammer books. So I only have one book that I absolutely hated and was insulted by. The C-section, I guess, it's not much of a do not read, but more of a you don't have to read it. It's skippable stuff. And then B is good, but not great. And then A is I would highly recommend. And then the top one is you're doing a disservice if you don't read For the Emperor or Galaxy in Flames. But I will preface, For the Emperor and Galaxy in Flames are two very different books. For the Emperor is a great book because of the characters and the story and the humor. Galaxy in Flames isn't a great book for the characters, it's just the action that I really enjoyed. I really thought that the characters were fine, but the action and the payoff to the previous two books is what makes it so great. Just the final battle between these loyal Marines and their traitorous counterparts was very satisfying. And that's my review of all the Warhammer books I read in 2020. Thank you and goodbye.